Escorts of Reddit, have any of you had a close friend or anyone you normally interact with daily be a surprise customer? What was the experience like and how did it affect your interactions with them? Story 1. When I was a cam girl, I would have many guys message me saying they were my cousin or something. They weren't, and they were just trying to play out a fetish, and I wasn't into it. So then one day, a guy in the main chat said that he knew me, and his name was AJ, fake name, and I was like, yeah, right. I've only ever known one AJ. If it's true, what's my name? And sure enough, he put my real first name right there in the chat. We were in youth group in church together almost a decade before that. He became a regular. Story 2. My much younger brother was getting married. Had a bachelor party at a strip club with a dozen or so high school friends. About an hour there, a rather ordinary stripper comes on stage, takes off her top, and our table of guys goes wild, standing and applauding and hollering. I have no idea what's going on. The stripper looks through the stage lights, her eyes get really big, she grabs her top and runs off stage to the back. Bouncers come running over to our table, thinking we're starting trouble. Nope, it turns out all of the guys in his high school class had a history class with her a few years back. She later came out and talked with us, said she never thought she'd see someone she knew. It was the next town over. Story 3. I'm a stripper. My friend's dad came in. I hadn't seen him or my friend since high school. I accidentally asked him for a lap dance before I could tell who it was. He said no, and I realized who it was as I walked away. He came in a few more times and avoided eye contact with me. When I was on stage, he would look away. Another story, my first day as a stripper, I saw two guys from my high school. We chatted, then they both paid for lap dances. Story 4. I was a bouncer at a strip club in the college town I went to school in. I did run into some of my classmates from campus at work. Sometimes they'd come in for amateur night and get offered a job. Other times they worked for an agency and would end up there for a night or whatever reason. It was kind of an unspoken rule to not say anything. If we bumped into each other on campus, I'd say hi. I ended up in a group project with one of them. It wasn't weird, it was like working on something in school with a coworker. I would say the only weird thing was ending up at a keg party where one of my coworkers was there. And when the cops came to bust it up, I felt compelled to warn her and get her out of there before anything bad happened. I never been able to resolve why I felt I needed to do that. Story 5. I used to get Denny's in Los Angeles every day I worked. It would be the wee early hours and I'd get a bunch of bacon and eggs, and it was only me and this one other woman ever in there at this hour. I asked her one day, hey, we're both the only two people here. Want to share a table? She said yes and we'd eat together. I found out she was a dancer. She seemed like a genuinely great human being and we talked about her life. One day, a bunch of her friends from work came with her, and I sat by myself so as not to assume anything. Well, she and they moved to sitting all around me where I was sitting. I felt really special then, like someone actually enjoyed my time and conversation. This was a pretty low point in my life, but I always remember this and smile. Story 6. Last semester, I ran a massage service, and I had this one client I particularly liked because he was so friendly, positive, and just really smart. I never asked my clients for their last names or too much about what they did for work. And the only thing I really knew about this guy was that he was in STEM. Well, fast forward to one existential crisis and a college major changed later, and this semester I have to take chemistry. Lo and behold, that really smart client is now my professor. Neither of us are currently acknowledging it, but I can tell that we still feel that bit of connection we did when he would come see me for massages. Edit. It was massage, regardless of whether I'm a licensed professional. Giving someone a hand job after working out their pain, tension, knots, etc. for an hour doesn't mean you didn't massage them. I sympathize for those who are victims of assault and harassment. I face the same sort of things with my business, and that's never okay. But massage therapy is and probably always will be associated with sex work, and people who engage in their endeavor should be aware of the risks involved. The people who conduct assault against other people are responsible, not me or anyone else who does the work. I'm not going to call my service just a hand job service or whatever else people want me to say, because a massage service is the most accurate phrasing for the operation I was running. I did not at any time claim to be a licensed professional, and I was always honest with clients about it. Yes, I am aware that it's illegal. Also, for the sake of massage therapists, don't assume they do what I do. Story 7. Not an escort or anything, but delivered to a pizza to one, and at the same moment I was about to knock on the door, a relative opens the door and watches me holding the pizza up to him. I couldn't do anything but laugh. He laughed too, maybe out of embarrassment, and as soon as she understood what was going on, she also started laughing. Never mention this moment to anyone who knows my relative, and he's grateful for that to this day. Story 8. Kinda, sorta along the same lines, I guess? Anyway, a friend wanted me to go to a strip club with him located outside a small town in Alabama. A young, really young looking girl got on the stage and he told me, "Look at her. Isn't she the prettiest thing you've ever seen?" I said, "Yeah, but she seems like she's too young to be working here." "Don't worry, she's 18. How do you know?" I asked. "She's my niece." I felt uncomfortable after that. To address all the comments I've gotten, it happened in a small club way out in the county outside of a town named Harvest. Alas, I don't know why it's so important for folks to know that unless they're expecting to go there and see the girl for themselves. Fat chance of that happening, it was about 10 years ago. So I seriously doubt she would still be there. Another thing, so many are casting doubt about this character or the nature of his relationship with the girl. Trust me, his tone was that of a proud uncle, not a dirty, lusty one. You would have to know the area. Drugs have decimated rural Alabama to the point that it's refreshing to find a young person that is healthy and making an honest living. Besides that, I had known him for years. You will not find a more religious, God-fearing person. Story 9. In the mid-90s, my friends took me to a strip club for my bachelor party. A few cocktails and a few stage shows in, and out walks an ex-girlfriend of mine. She was stunningly beautiful, but bat crap crazy. My friends desperately tried to get her to give me a lap dance, offering 5 times the normal rate, but she refused. She said it would be too much of an emotional strain for her considering how intense our relationship was and how it ended. She ended up sitting with us between her floor shows and lap dances just chatting. She had actually gotten married, and this was a way for her and her husband to save for a house. About halfway through the evening, one of the other dancers grabbed me and pulled me up on stage and whispered into my ear, "Are you wearing underwear?" Which I affirmed. She pulled my pants down, sat me on a chair mid-stage, and another girl loosely tied my hands behind my back. Each girl took turns giving me a lap dance up on stage. Turns out my ex paid them all for a lap dance and arranged the entire thing. Funny end to the story. After that event, I was at work on the sales floor of a local big box retail chain working, and in walks my ex. We chatted and had a good laugh. My lunch break came and I went out into the mall towards the food court, and my ex comes up beside me with a bit of a panicked look in her eye. She slides her arm under mine and leans in and kisses me on the cheek, saying, "Let's go get that hot dog now." Befuddled, I walk with her towards the food court, and she proceeds to tell me one of her regulars was in the mall and he was stalking her. She told him she was married and he didn't believe her, so I got to play the part of her husband. I walked her out to her car after the hot dog and a leisurely chat to make sure she was safe, and never heard from her again. Story 10. Not a worker, though funny story. One night, my best mate was in town. Lived in another state, used to live here. We went out clubbing and eventually decided to go to the strippers. Pay our money, and as we enter, my friend notices a stripper laying in her back, spread eagle for a guy. Highly drunk, he yells out, "Hell yeah, how good is this?" The stripper hears and notices my friend, sits up and yells, "What are you doing in here?" My friend instantly went and sat in the corner, proper embarrassed. Turns out, it was his cousin. Story 11. There was a girl I went to high school with who was basically a walking stereotype. She fit so well into the archetypal ditzy blonde mold that you might swear it was an act if you didn't know better. She was also mean. This girl was the worst, and wasn't really nice to anybody as far as I'm able to remember. People orbited her because she was hot and had everything. She never really bothered me because I did my best to be invisible, but the handful of interactions I ever had with her left me feeling unpleasant. Turns out she wound up being a pretty lucrative stripper later in life. I bought a lap dance from her, and while being nice is part of the job, it really did feel like in those brief few moments that she had a genuine personality shift. She was way more laid back, you could even hear it in her voice. She even commented about how she wasn't mean like she used to be, and I have nicer breasts. It was a genuinely fun interaction. She seemed happier in comparison to the person I remembered. Story 12. I had a friend who was a lifestyle dom. For those unfamiliar with BDSM lingo, a female dominant, not professionally, just personally for fun. She's into a lot of freaky stuff, but working in the public, she's very secretive about her identity. No pictures of herself online, and very, very cautious before meeting anyone. Well, she has had guys message her asking for some pretty nasty stuff, like bottling her pee and selling it to them, or even making a crap sandwich on one occasion. Yes, an actual crap sandwich. Well, the screwed up part is, she messages with these guys and they, without her asking, reveal all sorts of personal details about themselves, like where they live or work, and they would send her photos of themselves. On more than one occasion, she has run into one of them at work, and they had no idea it was her. She recognized him and thought to herself, "This guy begged me to make him lick his own nut off my feet, and he has no idea who I am." It would make her feel even more powerful. Although she remained perfectly professional in their interactions, but she may have acted a little snarkier than she normally would have because she knew they liked it. Story 13. Not exactly someone I knew well, but I went on a Tinder date with a guy, went to see a movie, nothing exciting. Nice enough guy, but no chemistry at all, so I didn't stay in contact. Opened my hotel door to my client one night to see him standing there. Didn't react to the fact that I knew him because there's not a single person who knows what I do. Spent the entire booking telling me how sad he was we never caught up again and how he knew it was me when he saw my photos. Photos were blurred and face cropped out, but I've got distinguishing hair. And how it must be fate. Played dumb the whole time because this guy knew my actual identity, and eventually asked him to leave because of how uncomfortable his behavior was making me. Story 14. My mom was actually a stripper when I was in elementary school. A 22-year-old guy came in and paid for a lap dance, and my mom recognized his last name and asked if he knew Ruth. I have no earthly idea why she would ask him given what she suspected. He got weirded out by this and said that Ruth was his mom, and my mom said that his mom was her daughter's 3rd grade teacher. He then begged her not to tell his mom where he was. Apparently, my mom just laughed and said she didn't want her daughter's teacher knowing that she was here either. I hated that teacher. She was such a jerk to me because we were poor and my mom always dressed provocatively. I'm glad her kids weren't as uptight as she was. Story 15. Was an RA in college and had a pair of residents on my wing who were both cam girls. Found out from rumors that were eventually confirmed when I had to help both of them get back to their rooms after calling the paramedics because they were passed out drunk outside our residence hall. Came into their room and saw the camera setup, toys and lingerie and set pieces, just laying out in the open. I also found out that night that they had a pet kitten in the room. Another rumor I heard about them that ended up being true, but I also heard they abused it pretty bad, poor thing. Anyway, as we made it up to their wing, one of the girls came to as we just entered their room and tried to play with the pet kitten. She rolled off the bed from her side, stumbled across the room in just a few steps, and ended up falling face first into a makeshift litter box they'd set up for their cat. Cat crap and cat litter flung everywhere. Our campus PD was so confused when they showed up to find toys and cat litter everywhere. Their dorm room nearly looked like a crime scene. What a time college was. What a time. Edit, yes, paramedics were present too. I just happened to escort them to their beds and lay them on their sides until they arrived along with our campus PD. Story 16. Not an escort, but found out a girl from high school that I had a crush on was a stripper. It was my buddy's bachelor party. We load up in a van and head out about an hour away to a better strip club. We get in and settle at a table. About 30 minutes in, I get a tap on the shoulder and this sexy chick hops in my lap. She calls me by the nickname I had in high school and hugs me. She was always tomboyish in high school, never wore makeup, always competed well in gym, kinda nerdy, quiet, and reserved. But always very pretty if you thought about it. I didn't recognize her for a full minute. It was a fun reunion. It was a full nude spot and she gave no hoots during her stage performance. Really seeing everything, I really should have tried to pursue it in high school, but I was a dumb kid back then. Story 17. I worked in a brothel in my hometown. Before the brothel, I worked at a pharmacy owned by a man I got along especially well with. We had a very close friendship and mutual feelings for one another, except he was married, and so we addressed the feelings but never acted on them. He always said he wished he had a time machine so he could go back in time and be with me, and that whoever I dated would be the luckiest man in the world, etc. One day at the brothel, some dude booked me and I accepted the booking. When I got in the room, I noticed he was my old boss's son I had met a few times when he had come to see his dad. He said he had been fantasizing over me since he had met me, which was weird because in the pharmacy I never looked decent. And it was just so weird sleeping with him. He had the same smile and eyes as his dad, and it really tripped me out. He became sort of besotted by me. He found me on Facebook and would ask when I was working or if he could come over. It was weird because he knew I had feelings for his dad and really didn't care. One day he was pestering me, so one of my coworkers suggested I say to him I will agree to have a booking with him if he brings in a pair of his father's dirty underwear. He was freaked out, but actually considered it. I told him I was joking and wouldn't be seeing him again. I felt guilty and weird. It was just too close to home. One of my friends still works for his dad, and he can be difficult to work for. She always says once she quits, she will say, "I quit," and Cat Q banged your son. Cat Q being me. Guys from school and stuff would come in, but generally I would avoid them or just decline if I knew they were choosing me because they knew me. It's just easier to not mix things. Clients don't seem to understand that it's completely transactional and that I'm not interested in talking to them for free. Story 10. About 10 years after I graduated college, my fraternity had a reunion during homecoming. One of my fraternity brothers was walking around with a very pretty woman in tow, introducing her to everyone as his fiancé. Now, this guy was not a ladies' man in any way. In fact, he was the kind of guy who had no luck at all with women despite his family's wealth. So at first I thought, good for him. The kid couldn't get a date, but now look at him. But then I started looking closer at the woman. She kind of bore a resemblance to the stripper I remembered from a few years ago. A druggy one who used to give handies in the champagne room, but I dismissed it, couldn't be her. Later at the party, she pulled me into an empty room, looked at me pleadingly and said, Please don't tell him. Story 19. I don't really qualify. I'm a guy who bangs women on camera for producers, so I'm not paid and I don't have customers. But one time I showed up to a shoot for a blow bang and ran into the guy who owned and operated the CrossFit place I went to. We acknowledged the connection on set and performed our roles, but basically never spoke of it again, and resumed to our normal trainer-customer dynamic after that. He was married at the time, but I think they were open. Not that it was any business of mine. Story 20. This isn't 100% in line with the question, but I thought my contribution might be appreciated. I'm a bi male. When I was in my early 20s, I broke up with my long-term girlfriend because she cheated on me. I started lurking around on Grindr looking for some light relief. In comes my ex's uncle in his 40s, who I had met on multiple occasions, sends me some shirtless photos and an offer of money for banging. I decide to take the high road. I don't reply, I don't screenshot and message her with it, despite being really tempted. A few days later, the shameless, almost nephew-in-law banger messages me, going, "Oh, sorry, Jaffe, I didn't recognize you with your new haircut." I still giggle about it to this day. Story 21. Not an escort, but a girl from my high school became a somewhat popular cam model / amateur creator. Nearly 50 million views on the hub. My school was small, so everyone knew everyone, and she dated a good friend of mine for a while. As if she were fitting a stereotype, she was the very quiet, nerdy, shy girl in high school. I found out what she did, but made no attempt to reach out to her because I had no reason to. One day I came across her work Snapchat account, so I added it. My screen name on there is pretty much my full name, so it wasn't like I was trying to be sneaky, but I assumed she was just too busy to look at it when people add her on things. Shockingly enough, she messaged me later that day and we chatted normally. She was super nonchalant about the whole thing. Apparently, another kid from our high school found out and went into her chat room spamming her real name followed by question marks, so she politely asked that I didn't do that. Seems reasonable. This was a few years ago. We're from the US, but she ended up moving to a major city in Europe. I happened to be visiting the area last year with my cousin for a backpacking trip, so on a whim I decided to send her a Snapchat saying I was in town. Again, I assumed she would be bogged down with messages from other people that she'd never even bothered to look. To my surprise, she got back to me right away and we met for lunch later that week. I told my cousin we're meeting a friend, and I informed him what she does for a living, but I told him not to bring it up unless she does. I wasn't sure how open she was about it in her day-to-day life. Sure enough, she showed up to lunch wearing a Hub-branded Letterman jacket with her stage name on the back. Yeah, that kinda set the tone for what she was cool with talking about. Lunch was fantastic. We just chatted and caught up. She said we could ask her whatever we wanted to know, so all of my questions were about what it took for her to move to Europe. She also gave us tips of places to see while we were in town. Story 22. Former escort here. I worked as an escort in a smallish city for many years, then showed my face in my advertising to prevent these kinds of awkward encounters. My partner at the time knew that I was an escort and was very supportive. One day, a guy who worked with my partner booked me without recognizing me. We'd met at some work drinks a few weeks before, and I chatted with him and his wife for an hour or so, but I probably looked quite different out of context. I recognized him immediately and explained that we'd met before without explaining how I knew him to protect my partner's privacy. I said that we're likely to run into each other again as we ran in the same circles, and he'd really appreciate not having slept together should that happen. He was perplexed, but keen to hang out for the hour and relax platonically just to get away from work. About a month later, he showed up to my partner's birthday drinks. The penny dropped as he actively tried to avoid us both. Oh, I slept with their former boss as well, who I recognized, but he didn't recognize me. Also slept with an ex-boyfriend's brother. We didn't recognize each other, but he mentioned his very specific family dynamic, and I realized I'd met him at his family Christmas a few years before. Story 24. I was a stripper and a bunch of rich banker guys come in. They want me to be their dancer, and I was thrilled. I spent my shift being as lewd as the rules allowed for and got a great tip for my trouble. Fast forward to the next day. We go to my boyfriend's dad's, bank president, house, and there's a pile of people I recognized. Presumably, they saw pictures of me and recognized me at the club. Thankfully, they said nothing to the boyfriend's dad, but they'd have me be their private stripper for the night once or twice a week. I think they were just trying to spite my boyfriend's dad.